My dad demanded I give my sister my cabin because young people need adventures more. She's now in prison for what happened next. Hi everyone. Today's story will blow your mind, but really quick, if you enjoy this content, hit that subscribe button. Channel's been a bit quiet lately, and your support keeps it all going. Let's jump in. I never thought I'd be writing one of these posts, but I'm at my wit's end and need some perspective from strangers on the internet. This situation has been escalating for months, and I'm starting to question if I'm being unreasonable or if my family has completely lost their minds. I'm James, 30M, and I work as a software engineer for a tech company in Seattle. 5 years ago, after saving every penny I could and working countless overtime hours, I bought a small cabin in the Cascade Mountains. It's nothing fancy, just a 2-bedroom A-frame on 3 acres of wooded property about 2 hours from the city. But it's mine, and it's been my sanctuary from the stress of work and city life. The cabin has always been special to me. I spent weekends fixing it up myself, replacing the old deck, updating the kitchen, installing a new wood stove. Every improvement was made with my own hands and hard-earned money. I go there at least twice a month to decompress, work on personal coding projects without distractions, and just enjoy the peace of nature. My family knows how much this place means to me. My parents, Robert, 58M, and Patricia, 55F, have visited a few times, though they prefer hotels to roughing it, as they call it. My younger sister Emily, 23F, has been up a handful of times, usually when she needed a free place to party with her friends after college. The trouble started 3 months ago during a family dinner. Emily was complaining about how expensive Airbnbs were getting and how she wished she had somewhere to take her friends for weekend trips. My father suddenly piped up with, "Well, James has that cabin just sitting empty most of the time. I'm sure he wouldn't mind if you used it more often." I politely explained that I actually use the cabin quite frequently and that it's not just sitting empty. I offered to let Emily use it occasionally if she asked in advance and followed my house rules. My father's response? "Come on, son. You're 30 years old with a stable job. You can afford hotels if you want a getaway. Emily's young. These are the years for adventures and making memories with friends. You should be more generous with what you have." I was stunned. The cabin isn't some inherited family property or gift from my parents. I bought it with my own money, pay the mortgage, insurance, utilities, and maintenance costs entirely by myself. But suddenly I'm expected to just hand over access because my sister wants a free party venue? Emily immediately latched onto our father's support. "Yeah, James. You're always talking about how we should share and help family. I promise I'll be super careful with everything." I tried to find a middle ground. I said Emily could use the cabin 1 weekend per month if she, 1, asked at least 2 weeks in advance, 2, limited guests to 4 people max, 3, cleaned up after herself, 4, didn't touch my personal belongings in a locked office room, and 5, contributed $50 toward utilities for each visit. My father scoffed at these rules. He said I was being petty and controlling, that family doesn't charge family, and that I needed to stop being so territorial about a piece of property. My mother stayed silent, which in our family means she agrees with my father but doesn't want to pile on. Emily agreed to my terms at the dinner, though she rolled her eyes at the $50 contribution. I thought we'd reached a resolution. I was wrong. The first weekend she asked to use it, she showed up with 8 friends instead of 4. When I found out, through Instagram stories, naturally, I texted her about it. Her response? "Dad said it was fine since you weren't using it anyway." I called my father, and he confirmed he'd told Emily she could bring a few extra people, because what's the difference between 4 or 8 when you're young and having fun? He accused me of being a bitter old man at 30 and said I should be happy my cabin was bringing joy to people instead of collecting dust. I was furious but decided to let it slide that one time. Big mistake. Emily took this as carte blanche to treat my cabin as her personal party house. Over the next month, she went up 3 weekends without asking me first. Each time I found out through social media or when I'd arrive for my own planned weekend to find evidence of recent parties. The breaking point came last weekend. I drove up Friday evening for a peaceful weekend of hiking and coding, only to find Emily there with at least 12 people. Music was blasting, the deck was covered in empty bottles, someone had moved my furniture around to make a dance floor, and 2 couples were in various states of undress in the hot tub I'd installed last year. I lost it. I told everyone they had 30 minutes to clean up and leave. Emily tried to argue that Dad said she could be there, but I showed her my deed and told her I was the only person who decided who could be on my property. Her friends were actually pretty understanding and started cleaning up immediately, but Emily stormed around calling me an uptight asshole and texting our father. Within an hour, my phone was blowing up. My father called me selfish, materialistic, and a disappointment. He said I was denying my sister experiences that I could easily provide and that my obsession with owning things was more important to me than family. He even brought up how he and my mother had helped pay for my college. True, though I also had loans and worked part-time, as if that meant I owed them unlimited access to anything I'd ever own. I stood my ground. I told him Emily was no longer welcome at the cabin without my explicit permission and presence. I was changing the locks and installing security cameras. If she showed up without permission, I'd call the police for trespassing. My father laughed bitterly and said, "You'd call the cops on your own sister? What kind of son have I raised?" He then delivered what he clearly thought was the killing blow. "You know what? I think you should just transfer the deed to Emily. You obviously don't appreciate what you have if you're going to hoard it like this. She'd make better use of it, bring life and energy to that space instead of letting it sit there like some tomb for your antisocial tendencies." I hung up on him. It's been 5 days now. Emily has been posting passive-aggressive memes about family who doesn't act like family, and when blood isn't thicker than water. My father sent one text saying he's disappointed in the man I've become, and that we'll discuss this at next month's family dinner. My mother finally broke her silence to send me a guilt-trip text about how this cabin issue is tearing the family apart, and I should be the bigger person. I'm not backing down. That cabin represents years of sacrifice, hard work, and planning. It's my retreat, my investment, and my property. I'm not going to hand it over to my entitled sister just because my father has decided property rights don't apply within families. But part of me wonders, am I being unreasonable? Is expecting basic respect for my property really hoarding? Should I be more generous with something that brings me so much peace and joy? I genuinely don't know anymore. Update 1, 2 weeks later. Well, the situation has escalated beyond what I ever imagined. Thank you to everyone who responded to my original post. Your perspectives helped me realize I wasn't crazy for wanting to maintain boundaries with my property. I followed through with changing the locks and installing a comprehensive security system, cameras, motion sensors, and smart locks that alert my phone whenever someone approaches the property. This cost me about $2,000, but I figured it was worth it for peace of mind. I also had a lawyer friend draft a formal notice stating that Emily was no longer welcome on the property without written permission. I thought this would be the end of it. I thought wrong. Last weekend, Emily attempted to visit the cabin with a group of friends. When her old key didn't work, she called me screaming about how I'd locked her out of her weekend plans, and demanding I drive up to let her in. I calmly told her she no longer had permission to use the cabin and suggested she find alternative accommodations. She hung up on me. 20 minutes later, I got an alert from my security system. The cameras showed Emily and her friends trying to jimmy open windows and even attempting to pry open the back door with what looked like a crowbar. I immediately called the local sheriff's department and reported an attempted break-in, providing them with the security footage. The deputies arrived within 40 minutes, benefit of a small mountain community where not much happens. Emily tried to explain that it was her family's cabin, and there must be a misunderstanding. The deputies asked her for proof of ownership or written permission to be there. When she couldn't provide either, they informed her she was trespassing and needed to leave immediately or face arrest. Emily and her friends left, but not before she sent me a series of vitriolic texts calling me a psychopath for involving the police and saying I'd ruined her life because her friends were now traumatized by the police encounter. I didn't respond. The real fireworks started the next morning. My father called me at 6 a.m., screaming so loudly I had to hold the phone away from my ear. Highlights of his tirade included: I was dead to him for calling the police on Emily. I had embarrassed the family name in front of her friends. I was clearly mentally unstable if I valued property over family. He was considering having me evaluated, because normal people don't behave this way. I had inherited his father's selfish genes. Grandpa James, who I'm named after, was apparently also difficult about his possessions. When he finally paused for breath, I calmly explained that Emily had attempted to break into my property after being explicitly told she wasn't welcome. I had every right to involve law enforcement. His response: she wouldn't have had to break in if you hadn't selfishly changed the locks. The circular logic was astounding. I ended the call by telling him that until he could respect my property rights and my decisions as an adult, we had nothing to discuss. But the saga wasn't over. 3 days later, I received a formal letter from a lawyer. My parents were actually exploring legal options to force me to provide Emily access to the cabin. The letter cited promissory estoppel and claimed that by previously allowing Emily to use the cabin, I had created an implied agreement that she could continue to do so. I couldn't believe it. My own parents were trying to legally force me to give my sister access to my property. I immediately hired my own lawyer. There goes another $3,000 from my savings, who laughed when he read their letter. He said their claim was baseless and that no court would force a property owner to provide access to an adult sibling, especially given the documented instances of property damage and attempted breaking and entering. He sent a response letter that basically told them to pound sand in legal terms, and included a counter notice that any further attempts by Emily to access the property would result in criminal charges and a restraining order. The family group chat, which I hadn't left yet, stupidly, exploded. Extended family members who had been silent suddenly had opinions. My Uncle Michael said I was being too harsh on a young girl just trying to have fun. My Aunt Barbara said that family should share, and reminded me of all the times I'd stayed at her house as a kid, neglecting to mention those were invited visits when I was 10. Even my cousin Jennifer, who I thought was reasonable, said I should find a compromise, because this was getting out of hand. The only support came from an unexpected source, my Grandma Linda, my father's mother. She called me privately and said, "Good for you, honey. Your Grandpa James would be proud. That cabin is yours, and don't you let anybody tell you different. Your father always was too soft on Emily." It was validating but also sad that an 80-year-old woman was the only family member who understood basic property rights. The security footage from the attempted break-in has been saved and backed up multiple times. My lawyer says it's excellent evidence if they actually try to pursue legal action. He's also suggested I consider a restraining order against Emily if she attempts to access the property again. I drove up to the cabin last weekend, my first visit since installing the security system. It was strange being there knowing how much conflict this place has caused. But as I sat on my deck, watching the sunset through the trees, I remembered why I bought it. This is my sanctuary, my investment in my future, my place of peace. I'm not giving that up because my family has decided I don't deserve it. My mother has tried calling several times, but I haven't answered. She left a voicemail crying about how she never imagined her family would end up in legal battles, and begging me to just let Emily use it once a month to keep the peace. The fact that she still doesn't understand that this isn't about the cabin anymore, it's about respect, boundaries, and basic property rights, tells me everything I need to know. I'm done trying to explain myself. I'm done feeling guilty for protecting what I've worked for. And I'm definitely done with my father's manipulative tactics and my sister's entitled behavior. We'll update again if anything significant happens. For now, I'm planning to spend every weekend possible at MY Cabin, in MY Space, enjoying MY peace and quiet. Update 2-3 weeks after the first update. The situation has somehow managed to get even more insane. I'm writing this from my cabin, where I've been staying for the past 5 days after taking some emergency time off work. I needed to get away from the city and, ironically, the family drama that this peaceful place was supposed to be a refuge from. First, the legal threats from my parents fizzled out exactly as my lawyer predicted. Their attorney apparently advised them that they had no case and were risking a countersuit for harassment. My father, never one to admit defeat gracefully, pivoted to a new strategy: public shaming and manipulation. He started by calling my employer. Yes, you read that right. My 58-year-old father called my boss to express his concerns about my mental state and my unusual attachment to material possessions. Fortunately, my boss, David, is a reasonable man who's met my father at a few company events. He called me into his office, told me about the call, and asked if everything was okay. I gave him a brief overview of the situation, and he actually laughed. "Sounds like you need to use some of that vacation time you've been hoarding," he said. "Take a week, sort this out, and don't worry about anything here." But my father wasn't done. He posted on Facebook, a platform I don't use but my cousin screenshot and sent to me. It was a long rambling post about how disappointed he was that his son had chosen property over family, and how he had failed as a father to raise someone who would call the police on his own sister. The post got dozens of comments from family friends and distant relatives, most expressing shock and sympathy for him. My inbox started filling with messages from people I hadn't spoken to in years, all wanting to know my side of the story or offering to mediate the family dispute. I ignored them all. Then came the escalation I should have seen coming but didn't. Last Tuesday, I got a call from my security company. Someone had cut the power lines to my cabin. The backup battery was keeping the security system running, but I needed to get there ASAP. I drove up immediately, calling the power company on the way. When I arrived, I found more than just cut power lines. Someone had a spray-painted, selfish asshole across the front of my cabin. Slashed all 4 tires on the ATV I keep there. Broken every window on the north side of the cabin. Dumped what looked like several bags of garbage across my deck. The security footage was enlightening. It showed a truck I didn't recognize pulling up at 3 a.m. Two people in hoodies got out, one notably smaller than the other. They spent about 30 minutes systematically vandalizing my property. The smaller figure's movements were familiar, and when she pushed her hood back for a moment to wipe her face, the camera caught a clear shot, Emily. The other person was harder to identify, but based on build and movement, I suspected it was her boyfriend, Tyler, who I'd met a few times at family events. This time, I didn't hesitate. I called the sheriff's department and filed a formal police report. With the clear security footage, vandalism of this scale, and the cut power lines, a felony in our state, this was no longer a family dispute, it was criminal destruction of property. The deputies were shocked when they saw the damage. One of them, Deputy Johnson, remembered the previous trespassing incident. "Your sister seems to have some serious issues with boundaries," he said, shaking his head as he photographed the damage. I spent the rest of the day documenting everything for insurance purposes and getting emergency repairs started. The windows alone were going to cost $4,000 to replace. The electrical repair would be another $2,000. The ATV tires, cleaning, and repainting would add at least another $2,000. Nearly $10,000 in damages because my sister couldn't handle being told no. That evening, as I was trying to secure the broken windows with plywood, my phone rang. It was my mother, sobbing hysterically. "The police just arrested Emily," she wailed. "How could you do this to your own sister? She's going to have a criminal record. You're destroying her future over a stupid cabin." I felt a cold calm settle over me. Emily destroyed property worth thousands of dollars, Mom. She committed multiple felonies. I didn't do this to her. She did this to herself. "But she's your sister," my mother screamed. "Family doesn't send family to jail." "Family doesn't vandalize family's property either," I replied. "Yet here we are." She hung up on me, but not before saying I was no longer welcome at any family gatherings and that I had chosen property over blood. The next morning, my father left me a voicemail that I've saved for posterity. In it, he threatened to disown me if I didn't drop the charges. He called me a soulless capitalist who had been corrupted by money. He said Grandpa James would be spinning in his grave. Grandma Linda later told me Grandpa would have done the exact same thing. He claimed I had destroyed the family over mere possessions. He ended with saying he would pay for Emily's lawyer and would see me in court. What he didn't know was that Emily's boyfriend Tyler had already flipped on her. Faced with felony charges and clear video evidence, he immediately admitted to everything and agreed to testify against Emily in exchange for a plea deal. According to my lawyer, he told police that Emily had planned the whole thing, driven them there, and specifically instructed him on what to destroy for maximum impact. Emily was released on bail, paid for by my parents, naturally, but she's facing charges for felony vandalism, destruction of property, conspiracy, and criminal mischief. Her lawyer apparently tried to argue for dismissal based on family dispute, but the prosecutor laughed at that. The amount of damage and the premeditated nature, bringing spray paint and tools, made this a clear-cut criminal case. The extended family is in chaos. Some relatives have actually reached out to express support for me privately, saying Emily has always been a spoiled brat and that my parents created this monster. Others have fully bought into my father's narrative that I'm a heartless villain who chose property over family. I've had to block most of my family on all platforms. I've changed my phone number, giving the new one only to my boss, my lawyer, my grandmother, and a few close friends. I'm considering selling my condo in the city and moving closer to the cabin, maybe working remotely full-time. The cabin itself is slowly being repaired. I've upgraded the security system even further and am considering putting up a gate at the property entrance. What was once my peaceful retreat has become a fortress, but I refuse to let their actions drive me away from the place I love. My lawyer says Emily is looking at probable jail time, especially with Tyler's testimony and the clear video evidence. Part of me feels guilty. She is only 23, and a criminal record will follow her forever. But then I remember the spray paint, the broken windows, the calculated destruction of something she knew I loved, and the guilt evaporates. I worked for years to afford this cabin. I sacrificed, saved, and earned every penny that went into it. I don't owe anyone access to it, family or not. The fact that my parents and sister couldn't respect that basic boundary has led to this disaster. I'll update again after the court proceedings, but for now, I'm sitting on my repaired deck, watching the sun set through new windows, and trying to find peace in my sanctuary again. Final update, 2 months after the second update. I'm writing this final update from a completely different place in my life, both literally and figuratively. The last 2 months have been a whirlwind of legal proceedings, family drama, and ultimately, major life changes. First, the legal situation. Emily's case went to trial last month. Despite my father hiring an expensive lawyer, the evidence was overwhelming. The security footage, Tyler's testimony, and the extent of the damage made it impossible for her to claim it was a misunderstanding or momentary lapse in judgment. The prosecutor presented a compelling case that this was premeditated revenge for being denied access to my property. They showed Emily's text messages to Tyler planning the vandalism, discussing what would hurt James the most, and even joking about how I would cry like a baby when I saw the damage. Emily was found guilty on all charges. The judge, citing the deliberate nature of the crime and the significant financial damage, sentenced her to 18 months in prison, with possibility of parole after 9 months, 3 years probation, mandatory anger management counseling, and ordered her to pay full restitution of $9,847. The courtroom erupted when the sentence was read. My mother collapsed in tears. My father stood up and pointed at me, shouting, "I hope you're happy. You've destroyed your sister's life," before bailiffs escorted him out. Emily herself seemed stunned, as if she'd never actually believed there would be real consequences for her actions. I felt empty. Not happy, not vindicated, just empty. I had never wanted this to end with my sister in prison. All I'd wanted was for my property and boundaries to be respected. The family fallout was immediate and severe. I received death threats from some of Emily's friends. My parents officially disowned me via a letter from their lawyer. Apparently you can do that formally. Most of my extended family picked sides, with about 70% siding with my parents. The few who supported me did so quietly, not wanting to face the wrath of the mob. But there were unexpected allies. My grandma Linda publicly defended me at a family gathering I didn't attend, apparently calling my father a weak fool who raised a criminal daughter. She told everyone present that Grandpa James would have done exactly what I did, and that actions have consequences, family or not. My boss David also surprised me. After hearing about the trial and the family situation, he offered me a permanent remote position. "You need distance from all this toxicity," he said. "Work from wherever makes you happy." Which brings me to the biggest change. I sold my condo in Seattle and bought 20 acres adjacent to my cabin property. I'm building a proper house there now, still maintaining the cabin as a guest house/retreat space, but creating a real home in the mountains. I've already got fiber internet installed, a proper office setup, and plans for a workshop where I can pursue woodworking, something I've always wanted to learn. The isolation that my father mocked me for seeking has become my salvation. My nearest neighbor is a mile away, a retired teacher named William who's been nothing but welcoming. He actually thanked me for dealing with the party problem, as apparently Emily's gatherings had been disturbing the peace of the entire mountain community. I've been in therapy for the last month, working through the guilt and grief of losing my family. My therapist, Dr. Patricia Chen, has helped me understand that I didn't lose my family. They chose to prioritize Emily's entitlement over my basic rights. She's also helped me see that their reaction to reasonable boundaries revealed who they really were all along. "You didn't destroy your family," she told me in our last session. "You revealed that your family was already broken." Healthy families don't respond to boundaries with vandalism and disownment. There have been attempts at reconciliation, of sorts. My mother sent me a letter to my P.O. box. I haven't given them my new address, saying she forgives me for what I've done to Emily, and is willing to welcome me back if I apologize and help pay for Emily's commissary account in prison. The delusion is strong. My father made one last attempt 2 weeks ago, showing up at my old condo building only to find I'd moved. He apparently made such a scene that security had to escort him out. He left a voicemail on my old number, which I keep active just to monitor their attempts to contact me, saying I was a coward for running away and that real men face their mistakes. The irony isn't lost on me. They still see me as the one who made a mistake by protecting my property and involving law enforcement when it was criminally vandalized. But there have been positive developments too. I've made friends in my new mountain community. I joined a hiking group, started volunteering with local trail maintenance, and even began dating Sarah, a forest ranger who finds my family drama absolutely insane and fully supports my decisions. My grandma visits once a month, driving up despite her age because she says I'm the only sane one left in the family. She brings cookies and stories about Grandpa James, who apparently dealt with similar family entitlement issues in his day. "He'd be proud of you," she always says. "You stood your ground when it mattered." The cabin itself has been transformed from a crime scene back into a sanctuary. I've added new features, a better deck, an outdoor kitchen, an expanded hot tub area. Every improvement is a small act of reclaiming what they tried to take from me. The security system remains, but I've needed it less for family drama and more for wildlife monitoring. Turns out I have a family of black bears that likes to visit. I've also started a blog about mountain living and remote work that's gained a decent following. It's therapeutic to write about positive things, to share the beauty of this place without the shadow of family conflict. Many readers have shared their own stories of toxic family dynamics and the difficult decision to go low or no contact. As I write this, Emily has been in prison for 3 weeks. I heard through the grapevine that she's struggling with the reality of incarceration, that she's been calling my parents crying about how unfair it all is. My parents are apparently spending their retirement savings on appeals that their lawyer has told them are hopeless. Do I feel guilty? Sometimes. Late at night, I wonder if I could have handled things differently. But then I remember the spray paint, the broken windows, the entitled attitude that led to it all, and I know I did what I had to do. The greatest irony in all of this? My father said I should transfer the deed to Emily because I obviously don't appreciate what I have, while she would bring life and energy to the space. Well, I appreciate what I have more than ever. I wake up every morning grateful for my cabin, my new home, my peace, and my freedom from toxic family dynamics. The only life and energy here now is the kind I choose to invite. Friends who respect boundaries, a partner who understands the value of hard work, and a grandmother who remembers what family loyalty actually looks like. My sister will be eligible for parole in 6 months. My parents will probably petition for me to write a letter of support. I won't. Not out of spite, but because I've finally learned that forgiveness doesn't mean allowing toxic people back into your life. They made their choices. I've made mine. The cabin stands strong, surrounded by mountains and peace. And for the first time in my life, so do I. This will be my last update. Thank you to everyone who supported me through this journey. To those facing similar family situations, remember, you have the right to protect what you've worked for. You have the right to set boundaries. And you have the right to walk away from anyone who refuses to respect those boundaries, blood-related or not. Sometimes the price of peace is letting go of those who disturb it. It's a price I've paid in full, and I don't regret a single penny.